Today's guest is Alisa Spark. She went from managing multi-million dollar military budgets for the Navy and Marine Corps aircraft programs to staging luxury homes with zero design training and a garage as her office. Since 2017, Alisa has built Linden Creek to a 17 location franchise, creating proprietary software that systemized an industry that swore it couldn't have ever been done, and also landed a feature in Architectural Digest along the way. But here's what makes her story different. She didn't just build a business around her talent. She built a business that doesn't need her. Alisa, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Leo. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so start us off. Maybe what's been the most significant lesson that you've learned this past year?
The most significant lesson I've learned is one I feel like I've learned a few times, but I've really learned it hard this year. It's surrounding myself with a team of exceptional A players that have the ability to take their specific subject matter expert and level up. As we've grown and built as an organization, it was a one man show once upon a time. And then you have a few team members. And now we're in a place where really we are a well oiled machine with a lot of moving parts. And one of the biggest things I've seen that's contributed to some of our growth is having those key players in that take their industry and take their department and evolve it and propose new ideas and ways to improve it beyond things that I'd be able to touch or think of. So props to the A players out there that make us all better.
How do you attract the right A player, and how do you empower them to do this?
I think that's been a learning curve for me over the years. But what I've realized is you attract A players if your vision is big enough for them to grow within your organization. The people that I have on my team today, I probably would have never said yes to coming onto my team when my business was 2 years old, right? So as you level up your business and who you are and the vision of who you're going to be as an organization, I think it allows space for these A players to come behind you and build within that because they can build their career path and growth opportunities within it. But in terms of attracting them, I think one of the other key things that I learned this year, actually, it was a valuable lesson when we made a hire recently. So we hired somebody in a director level role, wrong fit. Wonderful person, not the right fit. And it was one of those where within 2 weeks, we knew it was just not the right fit, didn't have the same hustle or drive, wasn't maybe picking up on things that I wanted them to be picking up on. And I was a little exhausted and exasperated. And so we went through the interview process again quickly after, and we're like, okay, we just need somebody that is going to fit the culture, that's going to make sense. And we are hustlers here. And so when we sat down, instead of a formal like interview at a desk, we decided to have an interview at a coffee shop. And I remember partway through the interview looking at her and I said, listen, we're all a little crazy. Like we work evenings, we work weekends, and not because I make them, but because we love it and we're thinking about it. And we text each other in off hours about ways and ideas we can get better. And like we breathe and sleep this stuff. So, like, if you're crazy and that sounds exciting, this is really cool and we'd love you. If you're not, like, I don't even want to waste your time. This is not the right fit. And it was the first time that I was so brutally honest about what we
Mm.
were looking for from a culture fit standpoint. And her eyes lit up and she was like, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And like 2, 3 weeks after onboarding, I overheard some of my team members and they were like, yeah, she said she's a little crazy like we are. Like she used the verbiage and recognized like this is the same thing. And not that everyone needs to be crazy to be an A player, but I think it's really defining who is your culture and what does that look like? And then owning it, good, bad, and different, so that you're actually finding the right people to join your organization that fit in with what everybody else is doing. And turns out, absolute A player and is crushing it in her role.
Mm. You're so right about just being brutally honest about things that matter. Because, like, it's funny. I was talking to a recruiter the other day, and she was like, we're providing some training to the candidates in the background so that they can interview better. I'm like, I don't want them to interview better. I want to know them, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. You want to have the real candid conversations. You want to know who they are and how they're going to handle pressure. And everybody puts on a face in an interview. So, yeah, I mean, multiple interviews definitely help. Giving them test projects, all of those things help. But it's a valuable lesson of be slow to hire, fast to fire if it's not the right one.
Yeah. It's one of those lessons that you almost have to learn. Some lessons can be taught, others are learned. Like Ray Dalio, like he's a huge proponent of like hire slow, fire fast. I'm like, why would you ever do that? That's like such a waste. And then, now being in this position as a business owner, you're like, okay, it costs a lot to hire the wrong person.
Yes, it does.
But I love that. So when it comes to building your company, I mean, that it's such a cool journey, right? I mean, you started from the military. The military was like super rigid to, starting your business. That's like, I mean, completely like endless possibilities. So how did you kind of like make that transition? What was going through your mind?
Yeah, it is a very interesting transition. So I was a contractor for the Marine Corps and for the Navy for almost a decade. My role within it was to manage multi-million-dollar budgets for naval aircraft, so helicopters and things of that nature. And so you're right, it's very standardized, it's very rigid. I love numbers, I love finance, so it was my happy place. But I had this creative itch, and so it was like I would finish my day at 5 o'clock, and then I'd read these blogs about interior design, or I would try to dabble. So I would build furniture in my garage sometimes just to get a creative itch out, or I would buy a really ugly house and renovate it over 2 years to make it something beautiful. And as soon as it was done, I was like, well, that's done. Let's get the next ugly house and do it again. So I always found myself gravitating naturally towards these creative elements. And I remember being at the gym one day on the treadmill, and was listening to Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, that so many of us know. He said something, he talked about the fact that a business is an asset. And I loved the idea of building an asset. And so it got my brain finally going on, what if I built a business? But what do I do? Like, I am in military finance. How do you build a business around that? But I knew that I loved the design world. And so I made the decision to take a leap of faith. We had a house on the market at the time that we had renovated, and the feedback on it is the staging was really good. But it wasn't staging, it was just my furniture. But it was this click for me, and I went, I could stage houses. I don't have a design degree, but I can stage houses without that design degree. And so I decided to pivot. I kept my full time job. I would take Fridays off of work, and I would work on my staging business on Fridays until it hit a place where there was proof of concept. I was getting consistent revenue, and I decided to make the full jump over.
Yeah, I think you're going through it, or like you went through it in such a smart way in that you sort of did a transition. So I made the mistake of just like going balls to the wall and like going full time. And like that definitely put a lot of like strain where it's just unnecessary, like especially like financial strain, because you're like, well, now like I got zero income, right? I can't test this idea out. I can't be creative. I can't think from a good mind space when I have bills to pay. So I think it was smart for you to do that.
Yeah, I think, there are a lot of lessons you learn early on when you start your business, the things that you're like, you totally did that right. And other things where you're like, would have done that very different. And so it gives you a little extra runway as you're kind of building the plane while you go, to make sure you've got it in a good place and provide a little proof of concept.
Definitely. So after you do that transition, so you're like working some gigs like here and there. Okay, it's like making sense. You're like, okay, it's actually okay. This could be something. Like how did you then kind of build out the company from there?
Yeah. So about a year into the business, I found myself in a position where I was a single mom. So two beautiful little girls, but I was living in a state that I did not have extended family in. I didn't have a lot of close friends yet. We had just moved there a year ago. And so I had to be in the carpool lane to pick kids up from school every day. And because of that, I would just get really busy in the day, and I'd be like, oh, shoot, got to get kids from carpool. I guess I need to hire somebody so they can finish out my day. And so I just kept hiring. And I will tell you, it was a really challenging time and season of like, hey, financially, can I afford to hire somebody? I would much rather take home that pay than bring somebody on staff. And I was worried that it was almost penalizing me, for lack of a better word, to like balance it all. I look back on it now, hindsight, and I see it was one of the biggest blessings for me, because it forced me to get out of my own way. And had I not done that, I wouldn't have grown as fast. I would have found myself in the weeds all the time, doing the monotonous little details that maybe don't build your business the way you need to when you're the business owner. And so
Mm,
in this hiring strategy, I found myself about 5 years into the business. I kind of paused and looked back at my week, and I realized my entire company ran without me and no one needed me. And I remember thinking, like, this is supposed to be the moment of like, you made it, congratulations. But I was just like, crap, no one needs me. What do I do with my life now?
yeah.
And so I made the decision of, it was really this moment to pause and go, what's this next season for my life? And as I was really pausing, I just remember thinking, I loved my life. I loved the fact that I had the flexibility to choose when I wasn't working and when I was. And not that I didn't work, I worked lots because I loved it, but I could pick when. I loved the compensation. I loved the industry. I loved my clients, my team. And I was getting messages from others in the industry, and they were asking a lot of questions around the systems. Hey, how do you store art so it doesn't get damaged? How do you handle pricing objections? And I realized we kind of unintentionally built all these systems up so that I could train my team to help me, that other people were looking for answers on. And so it was in that moment that I realized that I had this information that could help other business owners grow faster, probably save them from stupid mistakes that I made along the way that were costly. And that was what brought on the idea of franchising Linden Creek.
I think it's so. I mean, looking back, it sounded serendipitous, but looking forward, was it that obvious? Were you like, oh wow, that really just worked out?
I had no idea this was in the cards. I always dreamed, well, once I decided to start Linden Creek, I dreamed of a staging and design company. I was excited about it growing regionally, but that was it. I had no idea that franchising was ever going to be a part of it. So much so that even when the concept of franchising came out, a friend of mine brought it to my attention and said, "You should maybe franchise." And my answer was no. And I was like, "You can't franchise a home staging business. That doesn't work." So I had no idea that we were going to pivot down this road. It turns out after I did my homework and my research, I realized you could totally franchise this, and it makes a lot of sense. But it's interesting how certain people play into your life at different seasons. I think it's one of those lessons you learn along the way. Oftentimes, we think we know where we're going. And in business, we're always taught and told, like, have a 5-year goal, have a 10-year goal. What's your plan? Let's figure this out. But I think it's important to pause and reflect and go, sure, maybe here's my 10-year plan, but don't be so rigid to it that you miss an opportunity that pivots you to the left or the right along the way that might be the best pivot you've ever heard. I think the other piece
Mm.
on that is I found oftentimes my pivots were never my idea. It was somebody giving me feedback or feeding into a concept or a belief that I had and saying, "Hey, have you thought about?" or "What about this opportunity?" And my gut answer is always no. And then I pause and I go, "They're totally right. This is a big business decision or adjustment that I need to make that's going to make me better."
Yeah, and I take it that you have, or like you built a good kind of network of colleagues and mentors around you for them to give you this quality of information, right?
Yeah, in business ownership, I think we're all a little unique and odd. Like, we're the ones that probably could talk about business for hours at a dinner party where no one else wants to. They're like, let's talk sports, let's talk about Netflix. And we're like, ROI and KPI, and like, that's our happy place, right? So I found myself really naturally gravitating towards a lot of other business owners that could geek out with me and talk KPIs and metrics or marketing strategies or all of those things. But I'm grateful for it because it was in those seasons that we could share ideas and concepts and grow each other's businesses together. But it's also in those relationships where when you have that tough night that you're up at night because you're stressing about something, they get it because they've been there too. And when you have the highs and you win, they celebrate those wins in a different way than others do because they know the number of sacrifices you had to make to hit that win. And so I have found myself very closely tied to a lot of other business owners, and I'm grateful for that.
And did you just like kind of collect these, like maybe not collect, but just like make these connections over time, or is it like through I don't know, like through networking groups or like masterminds or something?
Definitely over time. And it's interesting. I think as my business has grown, I have found myself needing to kind of change some of the business owner friendships that I have. Like, as your business grows and levels up and your team scales, you find the problems you have are different than the ones that you had early on in those years. And so I think it's this continual graduation of surrounding yourself very intentionally around other people that are at your level or that you can look up to as a mentor. And so don't be afraid to kind of really continue to put yourself in situations where you can grow. I love a good business conference or coaching events and things like that. Oftentimes, not because of the content that I get out of it, you get little takeaways, right? But it's my favorite because it's a chance to build relationships so that, on a Tuesday in March, I can pick up the phone and go, "Can I pick your brain on this marketing strategy? Tell me your 2 cents." And I find that's a great way to start building those relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And it's not necessarily that you're not like you're no longer friends with someone. It's more so just like, hey, you have 24 hours, like and you choose to spend it like with different people.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to level up with your business because, like, I see a lot of businesses stall because the leader just, got comfortable like mentally or something, and they just don't feel like learning the skill. And like, I mean, your business almost like rises to the level of you.
Yes. It absolutely does. I attended a conference not too long ago specific to franchising, and they said there are two things that cause a franchise to fail. One of them is somebody runs out of capital, and the other one is the founder doesn't get out of their own way because you have a business that is growing and scaling. And if the founder or the CEO can't keep up with that growth and know how to be a visionary and see it to the next level, it it won't ever be able to kind of make the jumps that it needs to. And I remember hearing that and it set in deeply. And so it's one of those things that I always reflect on. And I think I love asking the question of where is my business going to be in 12 months or 24 months? And who do I need to be as a leader in that season to make that happen? What other leaders do I need to bring into my organization to help me get there? Um, but I think if you take for granted the knowledge you have today and think it's going to be good enough, you're going to sell yourself short on what the potential could really be.
For sure. And like, how do you learn these new skills? I mean, like maybe they're completely left field. Like, maybe you're learning HR and you're like, I don't know.
I think what's so cool is there's no better time than today for us to have access to education. I mean, like YouTube, HR, blah, blah, blah. And you're going to, of course, get 1,000 different people and some maybe saying different things, but you're going to find common threads. Listen to podcasts. I listen to lots of podcasts on the regular. And yours is a good one. It's like hearing from other business owners and sharing their experiences or even topic specific things. If you're interested in HR specifically, deep dive into it. I remember when I started my business, I had zero sales experience. And like 101 of business when you start it is you need to be able to sell your product. And so on my way to every sales appointment, I would listen to this sales podcast of the top performing sales reps that were in a certain industry. And I listened to hundreds of hours of podcasts, but I learned all the sales tactics from these experts in the industry that I never got to meet, but it was the education that I needed. And so I think it's just getting yourself in front of it. Another one of my favorites right now is having a conversation with AI. And so, you go for a walk, you put your AirPods in and you like sound like a crazy person talking to yourself, but you get a chance to be like, all right, let's deep dive into this new AI strategy. How do I go about doing and building this? Tell me more about that. Explain it to me like I'm a fifth grader. Like all of those things. Education is so easy to access. I think it's a shame if we don't take advantage of it.
100%. And yeah, I mean, with AI, it's just like everything's at your fingertips. I mean, granted that you're able to hone in that system to give enough context, right? Otherwise, it's just
Yes.
like garbage in, garbage out. But
Yes. That's exactly right.
so when it comes to delegating, you had mentioned that you were to a point that like you were no longer needed in your business. Like, I mean, that to a lot of people was the dream. I mean, to like not be needed, not to handle fires like, 11 p.m. at night and stuff. So like how did you like get your business to that state?
I think step by step, it's cool to be like, oh, and then I made it. It was so amazing. But there were a lot of steps in that 5 year process where you were figuring things out. Some of it's like the 101 of training, right? Like you do something and you watch me, dear employee and team member. Now you do it and I'm going to coach you through it. And now you do it on your own and I'm just going to watch and observe. And now you've learned the skill, right? But then you take it a step further as your business grows and you're like, shoot, we should probably document this on a piece of paper so that the next new hire knows how to do it too. And so you keep doing these things. But even as you're doing that, you're like, great, I built these systems and they're happening. And then all of a sudden you realize somebody forgets some steps, right? Or there was a season where I built this massive SOP because I had to for franchising. And, it's like this 300-page document. And I give it to my team. They're like, boom, here's everything you've ever needed to know and how to run it. And I remember like a year later reviewing something. And we used to give our clients gifts, these like cutting boards as a thank you gift every time we would serve them. And I like met with my team and I was like, cool, do we need more cutting boards? And they're like, cutting boards? What are you talking about? And I was like, the cutting boards we deliver to our clients. And they're like, what? And I was like, it's in the SOP that's 300 pages. And they're like, Alisa, we don't remember everything that's in your 300-page document. And it was like, right, like it's more than just words. It's more than just training one time for 30 days. It is like reinforcing again and again these different things. And what happens is when you keep reinforcing these skills and behaviors, your team starts to do it on your behalf, especially if you've got these A players. My team now comes to me and goes, hey, something's off. We're not seeing the quality that we want, or we're not getting the customer experience that we should be giving. And so it's this cool community then at that place in time that holds each other accountable in a very beautiful way.
And speaking of the 300-page SOP, I mean, I do remember. So my first job was I was working at Dunkin' Donuts, and they did indeed have a thick binder of SOP.
Yes,
Like, hey, here's the uniform. Blah, blah, blah. I did not read a single page of it.
that's correct. Which is what most people do, but I had to learn that one the hard way. Turns out people don't like to read really long, boring documents.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So how did you get them to understand like what's important and to follow through on things?
I think a regular cadence of meetings are really important. A huge fan of one on ones. I think as your team grows, sometimes one on ones aren't as practical. It has to be as a team, but getting everyone within a department or the whole organization in the same room on the regular basis is key. So, at a department level, to me, that's at least meeting once a month and making sure we're doing things right. That's the leader of that department, making sure they're coming in behind the scenes and making sure things are done correctly and they're doing quality checks. It means listening to your team and going what's working and what's not. But it also is the responsibility of the CEO to really continue to cast the vision and put a massive focus on the values that matter most so that we as an entire organization are solely focused on what's most important and they understand where they should be focusing their time and attention.
Mm, got you. And I think franchising or like being the franchisor, you have the unique kind of challenge or responsibility of making sure that like an entirely new team of people that you have never met yet follows through on something or some system that you made. So like how'd you do that?
It's a very weird thing. So, to give perspective, I was in our admin profile for our emails the other day and I was like looking through and I was like, I don't know who some of these names are. That's the weirdest feeling in the world, because it's a franchisor hired some employees. We're not part of that process. And so it's very unique to have these people in your organization that you've never had the opportunity to meet. But I think it just comes down to really good training and then really good follow through. So, we have an internal training team here that does quality control checks as well. So, once we've trained a franchisor up and we go, yeah, you're good to go, it doesn't mean that we never speak to them again or we don't follow up. It's making sure that they're still maintaining that cadence. And it's more than just quality control. It's also relationship building and developing. And so we have business coaches on staff that meet with our franchise owners biweekly or quarter or as a just an opportunity to talk not just about the systems and the operations but to talk about profitability of their business and their growth strategies and to kind of be a coach and help take them to the next level.
Yeah, I do think it is important, and like that's the beauty of being a franchisee is that you walk into the structure, right? Because like versus like making your own business, you're like structure, like where do I even begin? Like how do I
Yes.
get something basic done, right? And I think it's great. So like, how much of this kind of organizational mind came from your days in the military, or is it just like you innately?
I think a lot of it came from my time in the military. They, or working as a contractor there. I would say, like, they are very regimented. There are very clear systems for everything, and it is a non-negotiable to do anything but follow them. In some ways, sometimes, like, innovation is lacking, but on the flip side, they are an organization with thousands and thousands of people that are doing something the same exact way, no matter where you go and no matter who it is that's hands are in there. And so I think I was able to see that and learn the importance and the value of consistency, and the importance of having that structure in place. And again, going from that to this totally creative world. And home staging, oftentimes I like to say, is kind of like the wild, wild west. Like it's an industry, it exists. It's finally starting to build some validity across the country as a true industry, but everybody does their business a little bit different. There are associations out there, but we're still kind of figuring out who we are as an industry. And so to go from like one extreme to the other, it only made sense for me to bring structure to what I was doing in my day to day and how I would design and how we would handle the logistics. I think oftentimes people see interior designer home staging and they're like, they do pretty stuff. They play with pillows all day. And it's like, that is 10% of my day at the most. Like most of your time is logistics and operations. How do we organize our warehouse better? How do we systematize the way we're grabbing items off the shelf? How do we make sure that we know that that sofa's in that house and this one's in a different house? And so much of our real life is actually logistics and operations. So it felt very easy to kind of take systems to that.
Well, yeah, yeah, and for our business, like we operate commercial property, and like yeah, it's like pretty much most of the part like operations, like actually running the property day to day and like end to end. So it's super tough. So for you, like when you're like training these people and like kind of running a franchise, like what I mean, you've seen people of all shapes and sizes, like different personalities, different skill sets, backgrounds, and stuff. Like, what's kind of some like common mistakes that people make, or like common like I don't know bottlenecks that you coach them through, or like you had to fix?
It's interesting. I don't know that it's as much that I've seen common mistakes or like everybody's doing the same mistake. I think what I have found is that most business owners start with some base skill set from their past career, right? Like maybe they were really good at marketing. Maybe they were a designer before. And maybe they were really good in sales. And so they bring their really good sales acumen to this business and they crush the sales game, but they are really struggling on the finance side and the HR side, right? And so I think that's the more common piece of it is like you're coming in with like, it's sort of like the body. Like you're coming in with massive biceps, but your entire body needs to be strong in order for it to work. You need to have strong legs and you need to have a strong core. And so it's helping them build these other strengths into their bucket so that they, as a business, can continue to be successful. And so it's quickly identifying what are you good at and what are you maybe avoiding, because that tends to be the weakness. And then let's build up your skill set there.
Mm. Yeah, that's true. And yeah, I mean, when you first came in, right? You started with more financial background, and then you had like some inclination of creativity. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to, I don't know, like accounts payable, well, maybe APAR is up your alley, like sales, right?
Sales.
Sales, like how do
Sales
you
were the
close a
tricky
sale?
one for me.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Is I didn't have the sales experience. You read a book that doesn't make you an expert. And so it's just knowing and recognizing where do I need to level up. But I think that never stops as a business owner. Just because you have now the base of sales and marketing and HR and finance, what aspect do you need to level up even more to take you and your business to that next level? I don't know if I speak for all business owners, but I think that's part of the fun of the game. It's like you become addicted to leveling up your skill set and continually being challenged. It's like a giant puzzle of like problem solving and piecemealing and how do you get to the next level, and it makes it a heck of a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. And I was thinking about this too the other day that, you as a business owner, you're essentially in a very like tax advantage position, like the IRS, like they want to incentivize this kind of risk taking, this kind of entrepreneurship behavior. So like,
Right.
okay, you're put in this position to solve a problem. You have to level yourself up, and like the cost to level up, like they're deductible, right? I mean, they're expenses. And like as a result, you bring more value, you bring more jobs. So it's really a beautiful path for the right person.
Yeah, it really is.
So when it comes to time, I think that's a common constraint that a lot of us like try to figure out. Like we all have 24 hours in a day. So how do you kind of figure out like how you divide up your time?
I love to do a time audit on the regular. I think this has been one of my best sources for figuring out that answer. So, simply put, I will literally dedicate an entire week to jotting down what I'm doing every 15 minutes of my day. And two really interesting things happen every time I do this. One, I see where I'm maybe not as efficient with my time. And I'm like, I really am spending more time like catching up on emails than I need to be. If I was more strategic, we wouldn't spend so much time there. But I also am learning where maybe I need to build out another department or bring a team member in to delegate certain projects or time or priorities to free up more of that. I think there are seasons as a business owner you're like, I don't have time to do anything else. And then you pause and you think about like Elon Musk and you're like, he has the same 24 hours that I do, and he's doing a heck of a lot more. So, like, it's not a matter of I need more time. It's a matter of I'm not spending my time in the most optimized way. And so, I think pausing and reflecting on your time and what you're actually doing first to take audit of it before you make decisions on where it should be spent, it has been one of the best resources for me as I've kind of tried to balance it all and figure out what that looks like.
Yeah, because I think it's tough, as entrepreneurs. Like, there is no right or wrong. There's no one saying, like, hey, follow this 85-15 split of, like, work versus family and you'll be good. And, like, the answer is different for everyone. And, like, we're all in different kind of positions in our businesses and careers, right?
Right. And I think, there are different seasons as well. Like there are seasons where you're sprinting hard for 2 weeks, maybe where you're just like, I love you, children, but we're going to get a little less time for the next 2 weeks because we've got to hit these crazy wild deadlines. And then there might be 2 weeks where you're like, I am in a good place. My team is owning it and handling it. And so let me step away and be a human for a little bit. That's not just a business owner. And so it's giving yourself grace for both seasons, understanding that that's kind of the advantage that you get as a business owner. It's yes, this responsibility, but the flexibility to say when you want to push and when you want to pull.
Yeah, that's true. And how do you learn how to like prioritize like based on like, hey, how much do I want to work on the business versus in the business?
I think the answer always goes to you should be working on the business if you want to grow. If you want a job, you should work in the business. But like if you really want to grow and scale as a business owner, you should always be working on the business. Now, the massive caveat to that is the only way you're going to know how to work on your business is sometimes to be working in it. You need to step foot once again back into the day to day. Talk with your team members that are at that front line that are doing the day to day to really understand what are their pain points, what's different in the market today, what things have shifted and changed. And they oftentimes have the best ideas on how to innovate and make your business better. But I think the moment you start to get caught into the weeds of the just navigating day to day, it prevents you from being able to scale. I have always found my best ideas and my most creative breakthroughs happen when I happen to be like stepping away for the weekend, walking on a beach. Somehow magically, that's when the innovation happens, right? Because you spend enough time stopping what you're doing to actually just reflect and think. And that's how you can work on your business.
Interesting. Yeah. So this kind of ties into something that you mentioned earlier, kind of the hiring before you're ready kind of mentality. I mean, you kind of did it out of necessity, but how did you do it? How did you manage it? Like, would you do things the same way?
Hiring before necessity has been a common theme for me the entire time I've had my business, including even in franchising. It is scary, but there is nothing scarier than being like, I'm going to commit to your compensation every 2 weeks, and I don't know how I'm going to pull that off. But what I've always found is oftentimes you need that extra manpower in order to get to that next revenue level to be able to pay for their compensation. And so I think it's twofold. It's like, let's be a smart business owner and have enough cash in the bank that we can handle these first few months where maybe I'm going to be paying for their compensation out of my pocket. But it also is this like beautiful pressure where it's like, I have to pull this off. We have to hit these new levels because this person that I just brought on that I painted the vision to, they're relying on me to pull off what I said I'm going to do. And so sometimes it's a great thing because it forces you to really reflect and recognize that you have a different level that you need to execute at.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a great kind of pressure to like set yourself that mile marker and be like, hey, look, I'm committing to like X level of payroll, and like getting it, and like yes, I think there is some degree of like romanticism being like, hey, commit now, figure out the rest later. But has there ever been where like you commit and you're like, I don't think that's gonna work out. Let's dial this back a little bit.
We have not, fortunately, have never been in that situation. I think the biggest thing is it's timing it right. It's not hiring somebody 6 months before you need them. It's hiring somebody 45 days before there. And so oftentimes you see the tidal wave of work coming and, sales coming your way and you're like, before it crashes, I'm going to bring somebody else in the lifeboat with me. We're going to figure this out together, right? And so I would say it's not just like, I think we could get there. Let's just add somebody. It's like when you see it coming towards you, that's when you pull that trigger. But I will say, like, the alternative is scarier for me. The idea of I have a tidal wave of demand from my customers now, and I don't have the bandwidth, or I only have 24 hours and I can't physically support them the way I need to. That's so much scarier to me. And I think that's where oftentimes in the growth process for business owners, that's where quality drops. That's where reputation can quickly get damaged unintentionally. And that to me is more dangerous than anything else.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, I think just navigating with like customers first. Customers always right, but like
Yes.
that's what you should optimize towards because like on a bigger scale of things, it's like a customer determines what is valuable, and like you have to deliver something of value for your business to be valuable.
That's right. Yep.
So, one last question on this, like what's been kind of like in terms of delegation, what's been like the hardest thing to delegate that you found?
I think that the hardest thing to delegate is I'm trying to think of the best way to say it, like charisma. So I can say like, "Hey, when you talk to a customer, here's the sales process. We hit this and then we tell them about our deadlines and then we tell them about how this process works, right?" And I think sometimes it's hard to delegate the level of care and passion and kindness that you want to convey to your customers. I think oftentimes that either happens with an employee or it doesn't. But like coaching and teaching and going, I can teach you the skill set to say the right things in the right tone in the right way to feel like this is a reflection of who we are as a culture. That's one that I think is always very challenging to kind of pass off, if you will.
And how much do you think can be taught versus how much, like, do people just have to come with?
I think a lot of things can be taught. I think the bigger question is how much time do you as a business owner have to teach? So I can maybe bring somebody in that has less skills. They're going to be more cost effective on my payroll, but is it going to take 12 months for them to learn that skill? Maybe that's okay. And I'm happy with that. If I need that skill set in 2 months, I might need to hire a higher compensation for somebody that can bring that in. But I think everything can be taught. I think everything, just about everything, can be broken down into I mean, even what I said, delegating like the customer service experience. I think even that can be taught when you say, you smile and you keep your hands in this position, and then you make sure that you say their name 3 times. Like we could technically teach that. But I think the bigger question is, do you as a business owner have the time to coach and teach that skill set deficit that's there, or are you better off hiring for it?
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough. So I have a couple last questions for you, but before then, can you maybe share, Elisa, with the audience, like how we can get in touch with you? You know, who you're trying to meet, how we can help you.
Yeah, I love other business owners. So if you want to geek out over P&Ls, KPIs, marketing strategies, all the fun things, reach out to me, send me a message on LinkedIn. I'm active on there at Alisa Sparks. So that is the best place to reach me. If you want to learn more about Linden Creek and the beautiful spaces we get to design, check us out at www.lindencreek.com.
So okay, final couple questions. What was one belief you had when you're 30 that you've changed your mind on,
One belief I had when I was 30.
or in your 30s?
Yeah, yeah. I would say I think that I thought too small. So I mentioned that I love to go to mentorship programs and conferences and things. One of the reasons I've enjoyed that too is it challenges my thinking. So if you had asked me 7 years ago, what my business was capable of, I would have said this. And it was never myself that challenged that belief. It was always somebody else saying, "But why couldn't it be this?" that continued to level up. So I would say the part that's really challenged my thinking is what this organization is really capable of. And then am I, if the organization is capable of that as an industry and as a business, am I willing to step up as a leader to become the CEO that can make that happen?
Got you. And final question: what's been the best investment that you made that just had like an ROI that you would have never expected?
Education. Through and through. It is, and not like your traditional education, but like education within the industry, through and through, and specifically coaching in that. There are coaching pieces that I have paid for where I've spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for them, but they made the organization $250,000 and the ROI was insane. Again, I think oftentimes as business owners, we are so involved in what we do and the day to day, and it's become normal and commonplace that there is nothing better for me than to ask somebody that is not in my world to come and like deep dive into what I'm doing and question some of my assumptions that I've just had for too long. I think that's where I get the biggest ROI.
I love that. Well, thank you for all your wisdom, Elisa. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.